At the end of the last episode, I said the next vessel is not hypothetical. The next vessel is you, listening to this now. Eyes closed, leaning into the black, listening to the listener. And what rises there was never stolen from anyone else. Some of you did it. You closed your eyes, you leaned in, you began the practice or returned to it, or you finally admitted you had been circling it for years. You withdrew some portion of your attention from the machine that was harvesting it. You stopped feeding. You sealed the vessel. And then the silence started. This episode is about the silence. What it is, what lives inside it, and what is waiting on the other side of it. Because the silence is not empty. It's not neutral. And it did not go unnoticed. The system noticed, and the disposable self noticed. And that which is neither noticed even more. So when you stop feeding the machine does not ignore you. It punishes you. Not dramatically. And there is no letter, no summons, no visible enforcement. The punishment arrives as subtraction. The algorithm stops suggesting your work. The metrics flatten. The invitations thin out. The people around you, most of them still operating from their manufactured selves, begin to push back. And the pushback always arrives in the same vocabulary. Too negative, too critical, too heavy, too much. Why can't you be more positive? Listen to that accusation carefully, because it is a diagnostic, and it inverts. The positivity the culture machine sells you as medicine is the poison. The negativity you are being accused of is the medicine, because it runs against everything the machine has trained you to believe. The relentless, mandatory, smiling affirmation that saturates every feed, every workplace, every institution, every marketing channel, that is not health. That is the anesthetic administered before the scalpel. It keeps the vessel open and the light flowing out. And the moment you name the extraction, the moment you describe the machine accurately, the machine's defenses arrive wearing concern on their faces, asking why you have become so dark. Toxic positivity is the frequency the manufactured unit is tuned to broadcast on. Every unit transmits it. The enthusiasm, the gratitude performance, the triumphal announcement, the celebration of metrics. When you stop broadcasting on that frequency, the system and the people still inside it do not hear your new signal. They cannot. They hear silence, or they hear hostility, because those are the only two things their receiver registers on any channel other than the approved one. So the accusation of negativity is not feedback about you. It is a reading from an instrument that can only measure one thing. And while the machine withholds its tokens from you, notice what it does with them instead. It displays them. Everywhere you look, the funded, the promoted, the celebrated, the algorithmically blessed. The system shoves its manufactured success in your face. And the display is not incidental. It is the second half of the correction. Withhold the token from the one who stops performing. Exhibit the token being awarded to everyone who kept performing. And let the exhibition do the rest. No enforcement necessary. The comparison does the enforcing. Now let's look at what the token economy actually produces. There is a kind of organization, and you have seen it in every field, that runs entirely on this economy. It has a mission statement full of beautiful words. Joy, transformation, inspiration, community. It produces content built from that vocabulary, in bulk, on schedule. And if you ever look at the numbers underneath the content, you find something remarkable. Nobody watches. Single digits. The donors whose money paid for the content do not watch. The staff who produce the content do not watch it either. The rooms the content plays to are empty of anyone really listening to anyone but themselves. Or they were always going to be empty of listeners because the content was never aimed at an audience. It was aimed upward at the funding class. And the funding class does not watch. It reads reports. The content exists to be countable, not watched. A line item that proves the mission is being performed. This is the point. The system does not care about the content. It cares about the performance of caring about the content. So hold that. It describes more than one organization. It describes the entire attention economy you have been withdrawing from. Every metric you were ever encouraged to chase measured the same thing. Not whether anything real occurred, but whether the performance of the real was sustained, visible, and countable. And against all of it, one measure that the machine cannot register. One true listener is worth 1,000,000 hearing only their own echo. The 1,000,000 are the system reflecting stolen light back and forth across its own surfaces. The one is real contact. You will not be able to prove the difference to anyone still inside the metrics. You will know it anyway. Now the harder part. Because the pushback I have described so far is external, and the external pushback is not what breaks people. What breaks people is the feeling that arrives when the tokens stop. You withdrew. The metrics flattened. And somewhere in you, beneath the level where your understanding lives, a verdict was handed down. Failure. Not the system is withholding, not the correction protocol is operating, just failure. Yours. Personal, total, and humiliating. The work is not landing. Nobody is watching. You were passed over. You do not matter. I want to take that feeling apart because it was engineered. And the engineering is ancient. 3 episodes ago, I described a self that performs for validation because its worth was stripped from it before it could refuse. That was the wound underneath the precision, underneath the speed, underneath every anxious display of technical mastery. Worth removed at the root, then sold back on the system's terms, one token at a time. Approval, recognition, ranking, belonging, friendship even. Understand what that means for the feeling you are having right now. The withheld token does not create the unworthiness. It reactivates the unworthiness that was installed before you had a say in the matter. The enforcement mechanism and the original wound are the same. That is why the feeling, or why the failure, feels so total and so personal. It was built on it. The system does not need to argue you back into compliance. It only needs to stop the token supply and let the old wound do the taking, or do the talking. And the wound says, try harder, produce more often, adjust the title, adjust the thumbnail, adjust the hook, the pacing, the personality, the message, perform, soften the edges, or perform the tropes, please the audience. Give them what is proven to generate tokens. Mechanical reproduction of museum pieces. The predictable repertoire, or the compositions that mimic it. Smile more. Perform positivity. Feed the machine more of your light, more of your attention, more of your hours, until the feeling stops. Notice this positivity, this toxic positivity, is framed in total negativity, withholding from you. That is the loop, and I will name it its shape precisely. When you withdrew, 2 failures occurred at once. The system failed you because it was never going to deliver what the tokens promised. And you failed the system because you stopped operating as the manufactured unit from the disposable self. And a unit that stops producing is a failed unit by the only definition the system has. Both failures are real. Neither is what the feeling claims it is. The feeling is the disposable self grieving its own loss. The self was built to deliver light to the machine and to live on the tokens that came back. You cut the exchange. Of course, it is in mourning. Of course, it calls the mourning failure and pins the failure on you. It has no other language. Just remember this, the failure is not yours. The failure belongs to the system that built you to need it, and to the self that was built to deliver it. You are not failing. You are defecting. And the discomfort you feel is what defection feels like from inside the costume you have not finished taking off. The title of this episode is Silent Demand. And so far, you have heard two of its meanings. The first demand is the system's. It is silent because it never announces itself as a demand. It arrives as opportunity, as encouragement, as best practices, as the way things work. But underneath the friendly grammar, it has exactly one content: comply, come back, produce, broadcast on the approved frequency, feed. The second demand you will discover the moment you sit down inside your withdrawal and try to do the actual work. You take the instrument in your hands, or you sit with the silence, and you wait for something sacred to arrive. You have, after all, paid for it. You gave up the tokens. You endured the accusation of negativity. You crossed the desert. Now comes the reward. And you are met with the black mirror. Nothing arrives. No breakthrough, no beauty, no presence, no light. None that you can see yet. What arrives instead is restlessness, boredom, the itch that distracts, self-questioning, and skepticism, and the creeping certainty that nothing is happening. And this was all an elaborate hoax. Wasting your life. The mind that showed up for illumination finds itself ignored. And it is offended. And it begins, quietly at first, to demand. That is the second silent demand. The disposable self demanding a reward for sitting in the dark. It wants a cookie, a spiritual cookie. A breakthrough it can narrate, an experience it can keep. Some token of progress it can hold up as proof that withdrawal is earning rewards. The black mirror is the disposable self, staring at the absence of everything it was trained to need, and finding nothing there it can use, and calling that nothing a failure. Same wound, new location. You did not escape the token economy. You brought it inside you and let the meter run in the silence. Notice the symmetry. The system demands your performance. The disposable self demands its reward. Two demands, one voice, one direction. Back toward the exchange. Away from the silence. Anything but silence. But there is a third demand in the room. And it is the quietest of the three. Underneath the system's demand and the disposable self that is the system internalized, something else is pulling. It pulls in the opposite direction. Through the same silence, the other two are trying to escape. It demands nothing the system can provide. It offers nothing the disposable self can measure. It does not promise. It does not reward. It does not explain. It pulls. It has been pulling your whole life. It is the reason you picked up the instrument in the first place. Because anything before anyone taught you what the instrument was for. It is what the whole apparatus of tokens and performance was built on top of and built to hide. Here is the problem, and I'm not going to soften it. Sitting in the discomfort, you cannot tell the three demands apart by thinking about them. They all present as urgency. They all press. Thought cannot sort them because thought is the disposable self's own instrument, and it rules in favor of its owner. The only distinction is duration. The system's demand and the self's demand are loud. They need your attention to keep demanding. Stay in the silence and refuse them both, and they exhaust themselves. Not quickly, not on the first sitting or the 10th, but they are noise. And noise requires fuel. And you are the fuel. And you have stopped feeding. What remains pulling after they have burned through their supply? What is still quietly pulling when there is nothing left in you that wants a token? That is the third demand. You do not find it. You outlast everything that is not it. So what does this work look like on the far side of the token economy? You play for no one. No recording, no audience, no metric. Even if you are playing. Even if you are recording. Even if you are in front of an audience. But not even the internal audience, the imagined future listener, the invisible teacher keeping invisible score. That's the one you're not playing to. One note sounded because you choose to sound it, for the sake of the sounding and for nothing else. That note cannot be captured by the system or the disposable self. Can't even play it. Think about what the system would need in order to harvest it. A token to withhold. There is none. You asked for nothing. A metric to flatten. There is none. Nothing was counted. An approval to withdraw. There is none. No one was petitioned. The entire apparatus of capture works by inserting itself between the act and its reward. And here, there is no gap to insert into, because the act and the reward are the same event. The system starves at exactly the point where you stop needing it. An action done for its own sake is invisible to the machine, not because it is hidden, but because there is nothing in it to meter. And notice what happens to the disposable self at the same moment. The manufactured unit cannot do anything for its own sake. It does not know how. Every action it has ever taken was transactional. Effort exchanged for recognition. Performance exchanged for belonging. Content exchanged for metrics. Practice exchanged for progress toward a future exchange. Ask it to act without a transaction, and it has no role to play. There is nothing for it to negotiate. No counterparty, no terms. So it falls silent. Not defeated, unemployed. And that silence is a different silence than the black mirror. The black mirror was the disposable self screaming into a void, demanding its cookie. This silence is the absence of the disposable self. The noise has stopped generating itself. And what was underneath the noise the whole time becomes audible. That is the black sun. If you want to hear it, just listen to my tarot vignettes or the compositions. In the first episode of this series, I proposed an inversion. I called it profane musicianship. Stepping outside the sacred economy of performance in order to recover a profane relation to the instrument. Transmission, not performance. And yes, it is an inversion. It is a return to the sacred. There is a physical teaching of this built into your right hand. It has been there the whole time. In that same episode, I also named the 4 magical virtues, or the powers of the Sphinx. To know, to will, to dare, and to keep silent. Look at the hand that sounds the strings. 4 fingers play. The index knows. It points, identifies, selects. The middle finger wills. The longest finger, the finger of discipline. The most balanced finger from the arm. The one that leads in many patterns. The ring finger dares. The weakest of the 4, the one whose independence cost the most to develop. The one that must be trained past its own resistance before it can act at all. And the 5th is spirit. And the one that often carries the melody, our ring. And the thumb keeps silence, holds the bass. It opposes the other 3. It grounds. It damps. It decides what does and does not sound. Every note that sounds is shaped by what the thumb keeps quiet. That is the whole episode in one sentence. The silence is not the absence of music. It is its ground. The unstruck strings. 6 in total, the number of perfection, as above, so below, held in suspense, are what gives the struck strings its voice. A hand that cannot keep silence cannot play a clean note. And a player who cannot keep silence cannot transmit, because transmission requires an empty channel. And the channel is only empty when everything that is not the signal has been damped. 3 episodes ago, I ended with a question and did not answer it. Without the disposable self, the disposable self, who is left to play? When the heartbeat does the playing, there is no longer any player, as whatever is happening is no longer divided. Your heart does not perform its beat. It does not check whether the beat was received, does not adjust the beat for the room, does not wait for the beat to be approved. It beats because beating is what it is. It is what it is. undivided action. No gap between the actor and the act for anything to be transactional. That is the model, and it was inside the chest the entire time, not chasing metrics. It's not earning tokens. The player does not generate the music. Something moves, and the player's entire discipline, the whole of technique rightly understood, is to hold the vessel steady enough that what moves through it arrives cleanly. That is all technique was ever for. Not display, fidelity. And the instrument knows the difference. That is a plain observation you can verify. The instrument responds to who is playing, not what is played. The same passage, the same fingers, the same room. And the sound is different on the far side of the wall. Not technically different, sonically different. The quality of attention changes the quality of sound, because the attention is no longer split between the act and its imagined reception. Players who have crossed discover this without being told. You do not need to believe. You only need to listen. Let me place where we are in the larger work, because the series has been walking a path it has not fully named. 4 episodes of descent. Really an ascent from the ground. The stripping of the performance feels like a descent. The exposure of the fear underneath the precision. The disposal of the manufactured self. The naming of the theft. All of it downward, into the black. The tradition calls the stage negrito, the blackening. And it is not a punishment and not a detour. It is the necessary dissolution of everything that you never were. But it is not the destination. And a series that left you at the bottom of it would be incomplete at its starting point. This episode crosses the floor. Once again, this is an ascent that feels like a descent. In the 3rd episode, I planted an image at the far edge of the black. I called it borrowed light. The cool, reflected light that follows the darkness. The light that is not yet your own, but is no longer the darkness either. And I told you one thing about it in advance. Once it has entered, it continues working, whether the everyday self cooperates or not. You did not have to believe it, only heard it and listened. Something in you listened. That plant is redeemed now. The whitening is not a new attainment arrived from outside. It is the borrowed light you have been carrying since you first heard the truth of your situation. Doing what it was always going to do. The light does not arrive because you earned it. It was never absent. The noise was obscuring it, and the noise has exhausted itself, or is in process of exhausting. And what was underneath becomes audible. That is the whole crossing. Nothing is added. The interference stops. Comes to a halt. Now look back at everything the system did to you from the far side. The algorithm's silence. The flattened metrics. the thinned invitations, the accusation of negativity, or being difficult, the isolation that closed around your withdrawal like a verdict. The system administered all of its correction as pressure calibrated to push you back into the exchange. Every bit of it cleared the room. The isolation is not the cost of this path. It is a feature of the alchemy. The work requires a sealed vessel. And the system, trying to punish you for not feeding it, sealed it. The empty room it sentenced you to is the laboratory. What was meant as correction functioned as preparation. And the machine cannot help this because the machine only has one move, subtraction. It gives nothing, takes everything. And subtraction is exactly what the work requires. You needed everything that is not the signal removed. The system removed it with the loss of attention and handed you the conditions of your own completion. Every token it gives is just handing you back the value it stole from you to begin with. Your self-worth you were born with. So here is the position many of you now occupy. Without decoration, because it needs none. You are in the system, but not of it. You still pay rent. You still move through the machine's territory. Still use its roads, its services. Still appear when appearance is required. In its registers. The mask worn consciously, as I said last episode, while the real work runs in the sealed vessel within. And from inside that vessel, you play. And the playing asks nothing. The algorithm may ignore it. It probably will. The funding class will not fund it. There is nothing in it to transact. No performance, no self-congratulations, no virtue narcissism, no closed-loop circle jerk. The system is only giving you tokens of value that you already have, so it can't give you anything. So you have nothing to gain from the system. The culture machine has no category for it, because every category the machine has is a species of exchange. And this is not an exchange. Stop exchanging. You hold the value. Just maintain it. And none of that touches it, because the source that made all of it possible, the current the entire machine has been running on since before you were born, does not require the algorithm, or the funders, or the categories. Without your light, the system has nothing to capture. It never did. The source does not need the system. The system needs the source. The direction of dependency was always the reverse of what the manufactured unit was trained to believe. And you have now verified this personally, from the inside, by the simplest experiment there is. You stopped feeding it, and you did not die. And something in you that the tokens never reached began, at last, to sound. I will close with two things. not a summary, but the far edge of what I can say in words. And past that, the words stop. You can listen to the music. The first is about the practice at its deepest point. You sit, you listen, and if you stay long enough, the one who is listening begins to thin. And there is a moment, and it cannot be manufactured or demanded, when the listener falls away entirely, and the listening remains. When you listen, and the listener falls away, that is God listening back. And you recognize it because this God has no name. Just like you have no name, except the one the system labeled you with, without your consent or knowledge. Whatever that word means to you, God, whatever baggage it carries or does not, the event I am pointing at is prior to the word and does not depend on it. The listener does not reach the source. The source is what is already listening when the listener dissolves. The second thing is for the nights when the silence feels like a mirror again. Because there will be such nights on the far side of the crossing, as well as before it. When all falls silent, know you are only halfway there. Just keep listening till you hear the roar that makes no sound. And you know that roar is you calling you home. If this resonated, the earlier episodes trace the descent. This one crosses out of. Really the ascent. But it feels like a descent at first. And the compositions on this channel are where the practice goes when it turns into music. Thank you for listening.